Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I am from EasyAutomation.com and welcome to another video of our Selenium 4 series. And today we are going to talk about understanding Selenium Grid, which was introduced on the day Selenium launched. Alright, so let's get started. Selenium 4 Grid introduced on the same day of Selenium launch, which has got many new features and the way to run tests in a distributed manner. This is really cool because we have been using Selenium Grid for a pretty long time right now until Selenium 3, and we know that Selenium Grid has not drastically changed, at least in terms of the way we use Selenium Grid. But now we can run Selenium Grid in an standalone mode, classical grid mode, and fully distributed mode. So the standalone mode is something that you can just specify the Selenium Grid jar file as a standalone. That standalone will act as both as a server and as a node, which is pretty cool. This feature is very handy because you don't really have to spawn two different command prompts and run the Selenium hub and node separately. Rather, the standalone will does things for you. And this is very helpful if you're going to run the test on a local machine to see how Selenium Grid is actually working. And the next mode is the classical grid mode, where we have the server and the node configuration. Again, this is pretty normal like how we do earlier in Selenium 3, but just that we have a little bit changes in here with the subscribe event and subscribe session options, which we'll be discussing in this video anyways. And the next option, which is kind of very helpful because this is something which many people can leverage to customize how the Selenium Grid actually works, which is nothing but the fully distributed mode, where we can run the Selenium Grid with a session, a distributor, and a router to be enabled. So again, this is like a fully customized way of running the Selenium Grid with each and every components being executed or being us to control and see how it actually works. So we are going to be discussing the whole new features of Selenium 4 Grid in this video and understand how things work. So the first one is the standalone mode. As I told before, the only thing that you need to do for running the Selenium Grid setup with both node and the hub running together is the standalone mode. So you just run the jar file with a standalone command, that's it. You will run the Selenium Grid in a standalone mode with both hub and node, which is pretty awesome, and we'll see how it actually works in this video anyways. And the next option is the hub and the node option. And again, this is like same configuration how we used to do, but just that this time for the node configuration, you are going to specify the detect drivers option. So which will specify that whatever drivers that you have within your machine in the system path, and you will also have a publish events parameter which specifies the hub and the subscribe events for the hub as well. So once you run the hub, it will emit the publish events and the subscribe events options, and this is exactly what you need to be subscribing while you run the node. And again, this is very helpful while you're going to run the node configuration in a different machine. But if you want to run the same node in a local machine, then probably you can just specify the jar file node and detect drivers, which will automatically hook with the local host of :444 option. But if you're going to run the Selenium node in a different machine, then you probably have to give the IP address as like 10.0.75.1 with a port number so that it can establish the connection with the hub. So this is how we can run the hub and the node configuration. The last option is the fully distributed options. So in the fully distributed option, you need to specify the session, as you can see in here. And then once the session is established, then you need to distribute this session for the local host of 5556 port number. And this session is going to be used for the router, which is going to pass the session to the HTTP, which is going to be used for subscribing these events and the sessions in the node level. So you can see that this is the same session with this particular Selenium hub session is being used for this particular node, but this particular node is now running in a different machine. So this is something that you can see that it is like a fully distributed way, and you can control in a very granular until the session level. So this is very handy option as well. So we'll be discussing about the standalone Selenium hub node configuration and fully distributed option in this video and understand how things work. So for that, I'm going to flip to my Windows operating system right now. So this is the Selenium Grid 4 web page updated on April 25th, which is nothing but on April 24th, the Selenium was released, and the next day, the Selenium Grid page was also updated, and there was no update happened after that. So this is still in Alpha 1, as you can see in here, but the latest jar which is available within the repository is, or the release is actually Alpha 2 jar, so you can use that version as well. But for our demonstration, I'm actually going to use the Alpha 1 jar just to showcase you how the code is actually going to work. But it is not going to make any difference to work with Alpha 1 or Alpha 2 at this particular point of time. So I'm just going to use the Alpha 1 jar just for the demonstration purpose. So as you can see here, we have a standard mode, hub and node, and a fully distributed mode that we saw in the slide before. So we're going to be using the exact same commands that you can see in here. So the first one is going to be the standalone mode. So I'm just going to use this one. I'm actually going to use the code base, as you can see in here, which is the code that we used in our everything you need to know in Selenium 4 and also for the Chrome dev tool. This is the same code that is available in the repository in the GitHub. So I'm just going to use the same guy in here, but just that I'm going to add one more line here to work with the remote web driver, as you know already. So I'm going to do like this, var of the Chrome driver, because that's what's been used. So I'm just going to use the Chrome driver is equal to new of remote web driver, as you can see in here. And then we need to pass the new URL. And as you know before, for the Selenium Grid connectivity, we used to put the URL as localhost:4444/wd/hub. But right now, the wd/hub is completely gone because it is not required from this particular version. Rather, you just have to give the localhost:444 and the code will start working based on that. That's how you make the connectivity with the Selenium Grid server over here. And then I'm just going to pass the new of the Chrome options so that it's just going to connect it. I'm just going to save this code, and then I need to run the Selenium server itself in a standalone mode. So for running the Selenium in a standalone mode, all I'm going to do is I need to download the jar file, which I have already did. So I'm just going to do a java-jar of the Selenium Alpha 1. And then I can just put the standalone. But if you want to see what are the other options available or the commands available, you can see there are commands like distributor, hub, node, router, sessions, and standalone. And the one which we're going to use this time is going to be the standalone. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that it is going to act as both server and as a node. So you can see that we now have a capability being added for the Chrome as 9 times, and adding the capability of the browser name as Microsoft Edge, which is 1 time. And you can also see there is an option showing that added node, something like this. So meaning there is a node is also being added over here, which is pretty awesome. And now if I directly go to the status to check how the particular server is going to look like, I'm just going to hit status, and now you can see that we have something called as a nodes, and we have an ID with an URL in here, and then there is a capability of the Chrome, and then there is a capability of the Microsoft Edge as well. So now we can use the Chrome for the execution and see how things work. So I'm just going to save this particular stuff. If I try to execute this particular piece of code, so now we expect the Chrome browser to be spawned and the execution should happen. You can see that the Chrome browser is opened here. And you can see that it has opened the amazon.in website. So this is how it works with the Grid standalone version. So this way it acts as both as a hub and as the node. Which is pretty simple and straightforward from this particular version of Selenium. So if you're going to run the Selenium server in the local machine as a grid setup, you don't really have to have a node and hub setups and all those stuff. Rather, you can just run one command like standalone, and things are pretty easy and normal starting this version. And the next option that we're going to see is running the Selenium in the hub and node setup, which is more like a classical way of doing like how we were doing even earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop this particular standalone version. Rather, I'm just going to say hub, and I'm going to hit enter. So this way it will start on hub for us. And then we are going to run the node. And again, if I show this the same thing in my local machine, then there is no difference between the standalone and with the hub and the node setup. Rather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can do the same using a remote machine. So I'm just going to use the Hyper-V in here, which is actually my virtual machine. I'm going to sign in. So this is my Windows 10 virtual machine, which is running within my Hyper-V. And if I go all the way to my C colon of this machine, I have already copied the Selenium alpha version of the jar files over here so that I can execute the code and see how it actually works. My Java is installed within this particular location. So I'm just going to go all the way here, and I'm just going to open a command prompt here so that I can show you how we can do that. And once again, to run the node, all we're going to do is we're going to give the java-jar of the jar file location, and then detect drivers, and then we're going to give the publish events of the IP address of the hub and the subscribe events of the node. So you can see that I'm just going to subscribe so this is the publish events for hub that we are going to connect. And now if I go back all the way to my hub, you can see that it actually has a TCP of this particular URL over here. So this is the exact same thing that I have connected here so that I can make connectivity. So this is the one important thing, guys. You cannot use your local machine's IP address in here to make a connectivity. Rather, you're going to use this particular TCP connectivity to make a handshake between both of them. So once I started this, you might see there is actually a connection status of the node happen in here. So it also shows me that this is a WinDev 1909 evaluation of the MS Home Net of this particular version. So this is exactly the desktop, as you can see in here. This is the same machine which is actually being connected. And now if I go back to my status check that we did before, you can see earlier we had our local machine status for the URI. And now if I try to refresh this, you can see this machine name has been changed to the machine which is actually running. This is the evaluation version of the Windows I'm actually running in this particular environment. So I'm just going to keep this guy side by side. And now if I try to execute the same code that we were executing before, but this time I'm actually not going to use the Chrome driver. Rather, I'm going to use the Edge driver because I don't really have an Chrome installed in that machine. So this proves the point that we can also use the Edge driver and see how it works. So I'm just going to copy my driver path, or maybe I'm just going to rename this, copy this, and I'm going to paste it over here. And this is going to be Edge options. So I'm just going to save this. And now if I try to execute this particular piece of code, and if I just keep the virtual machine open here, so you can see that it is actually getting the handshake, and then it is open the amazon.in website within my virtual machine, which is running over there, which is pretty awesome. And now if you want to see how the session is being maintained between the hub and the node, you can once again go back in here, and if you refresh the status this time, you can see that it actually has a session details. So it actually has a session ID, and then it has the current capabilities of that particular machine. So it gets all of stuff, and then page load strategy, platform name, and set Windows rectangle as false, and all those stuff. So it has all the sort of jazz over here as a capability, and then it shows us everything which is related to this particular machine. Alright, so this proves the point that we can also run the Selenium Grid and the node setup from the latest version of Selenium 4 grid setup. And the last option that we're going to talk about is the fully distributed way of running the Selenium Grid setup. So all I'm going to do for this time is I'm just going to stop the particular execution in here. So the first thing I told you before is we need to run the sessions. So I'm just going to do that. Oops, it's not session, it's sessions. So this way it creates a sessions that you can see in here. And once this is done, then we need to have a distribution. So for doing that, I'm going to open two more command prompts, which is going to be doing that operation for us. So as I told you, we need to have the distribution of the session set for that particular execution. So I'm just gonna do that. As you can see here, the sessions is going to be maintained in the localhost :5556. So this is a different port altogether. I'm just going to run this, and you can see this time it is also connecting to this particular port number. So this is the port number, guys, that we should be aware of, because this is the exact same port number which is being used for the one which we are running within our machine over here, right? So there we go. This is done. And the last operation that we need to do is actually the session route. So we need to give that as well. So you can see this is the java-jar of this particular router, and then sessions is the session that we set, and then the distribution is going to be the localhost of 5553, right? So everything is being set right now. So we have set the router, and we have set the sessions, and we have also set the distributor. So distributor is there, session is there, and then we also have the router. So now all these three configurations of the component has been done. The last thing that we need to do is going to be running the node. And once again, for running the node, we don't really have to do any change in the client side, because as we know before, we have already passed the publish events of this particular IP address and the subscribe events for this particular IP address, and everything is going to be pretty much exactly the same thing. So there is no change on that side, because as you know, the IP address is going to be still the same thing, and the port numbers are going to be still the same thing. So these are going to be remaining the same, and there is no change on that side, at least in the virtual machines of the node which is running. So I'm just going to run the same test once again. And now if I try to run this code, and you'll see what's going to happen. I guess we should probably stop this particular node and then start it again, because sometimes it is not actually doing a handshake, because this is a new driver stuffs we have did, and the setup is completely different. So I'm just going to stop this, and if I try to run this again, there you go. I guess there will be an handshake happen here this time, as you can see in here, for this particular Windows machine over here, which is cool. And now if I try to refresh this once again, there you go. And now I could able to see the capabilities and all those stuff pretty much exactly like how we saw before. And now if I try to execute this code, hopefully this time the code will execute. So we should actually restart the node so that it can make the connectivity. And now you can see that it is actually running the code within the virtual machine using the fully distributed setup that we have made, which is pretty awesome. So this is how we can actually run the Selenium Grid setup with standalone hub and node setup and a fully distributed setup in a much easier fashion. I guess this has improved the way that we were doing the distributor testing before, and this will open a whole new way of doing distributor testing using Selenium Grid. So you can see the status check, and also if you just do a 444 here, I guess these things are because of the exceptions coming in from the early versions. So probably we should just bear with the bugs being fixed. But the only thing which is working currently is like the status that you can check and see how it is actually working. So that's it, guys. Once again, thank you very much for watching this video. And this is how we can work with the Selenium 4 grid setup. Thank you.